I've always been curious about how things work, and if you see something that you think you can do something to help with, you deploy your skill sets to it, because our lives are finite anyway. We're just tourists on the planet. That's what we do with it, and how we can be as useful as possible. About 20% of the population have a thing called needle phobia, which means that they'll actively avoid whatever the treatment is that is on offer by that vehicle. Where microneedles come in the world of sensing is that I've identified you only need to go a hair's width into the skin to gain access to the signals that matter. Now step 2 is taking that forward as a technology through further clinical and field testing and turning that into a product.
Hey everybody, delighted to be joined this week by Mark Kendall, founder of WearOptimo, and we're going to be talking about something close to my heart as an ex-anaesthetist. Hydration, fluid management, but not in a boring sense, as we would call it, a fluid management in anaesthetics. So gutted if you're sitting your anaesthetic exams and listening to this expecting to learn something. We're actually going to be talking about this in terms of Formula One drivers and very cool wearables and stuff. So yes, Mark, sorry for butchering the description of your company there. I'm sure we're going to talk about that in a bit better detail, but welcome to the Healthtech Podcast. How you doing?
Very well, thanks, James. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too, man. So with that accent, I assume you're calling from Australia, or are you based somewhere else globally?
No, calling in from Brisbane, Australia. It's late at night here and morning there, no doubt.
Perfect.
Over there in England. Yep.
Absolute pleasure to have you on. I love these kind of episodes because we can actually geek out on some technology. I can I can try and flex some medical knowledge that I've still got knocking around in the back of my mind. But I do think it's interesting to talk about hydration. And obviously we're going to talk about it in some very cool stuff that you're up to. But the way that the body handles fluids is so unbelievably important, but it's not a sexy topic. It's just not. It's not sexy if you're a medic. It's not sexy if you're not a medic. But the importance of it is, it's frankly just ridiculous how important this is. So to be building a company in this space, I can imagine from a healthcare and a health tech perspective, once you start talking about it to the right people, you end up getting quite a lot of attention on this, and it comes down to the application of it. So for something like you're doing with wearables and micro needles and applying that in elite sport and things like that, there's a lot to be excited about here for someone like me. So I'm very much looking forward to getting into this with you. But before we talk about the company and everything that you're up to there, why don't you start with your story? So where does this begin? Are you from an entrepreneurial household? Are you from a long lineage of founders and entrepreneurs? Or is this something that you got interested in at university? Where does this all begin for you?
That's a great question. I've always been curious about how things work, and if you see something that you think you can do something to help with, you deploy your skill sets to it. So that's always been my outlook. I think above all, I see myself as an engineer, and the different labels and titles. I'm founder and CEO of WearOptimo, but I just see that as tools to express my inner engineering DNA, if you like, which is to get things done and make a difference in a good way. So the way I became a biomedical engineer was not a straightforward journey. It was actually, you could call me really an accidental biomedical engineer. So I love rockets, aerospace, did my PhD in rockets. It was in hypervelocity aerodynamics. Worked on one of the world's fastest wind tunnels. It was funded by NASA. I was supposed to go to California to work on rockets there. Had a job lined up to do it. And yet, I don't know if this happens too much, James, but a 2-minute conversation just changed everything. I met someone. I met someone at a conference. He came up to me, said, enjoyed my presentation. Had this idea to use rockets to fire vaccines into the skin. And I thought, that sounds really interesting. And he asked if I could come and work with him. And so I thought about it, and I thought, well, I had 2 questions at the time. One was, where are you doing this work? And he said, at Oxford University. And the second was, would I get a chance to row? And as in being an oarsman. And he said, if you're good enough. So that changed everything. And of course, there was a process to get into Oxford. It wasn't just a walk in the park. But 6 months later, I was at Oxford instead of California. And
Did you make the boat race? Crucially, the crucial question here: did you get in that Putney water and get in the
No, I was in. I did row for my college in the first 8 for 3 years, which was wonderful, and invited to the squad for the blue boat, but actually, strangely enough, declined.
You declined it?
Well, yeah, there's layers to that answer, but one of them is James. In my heart of hearts, I probably knew I wasn't going to be at that level. There was a non-Olympic year, but also on top of that, I wasn't a student. I was a young lecturer and just full on working. And the first commitment was to spend 6 weeks in Brazil in a training camp. So I just thought, well, I'm married and working full time and rowing full time, so I'm going to have to choose one to stop.
Yeah.
And
you can't do everything, Mark. You can't do everything. And also as well, the boat race is it's quite a funny one, isn't it? Because it's actually harder to get into those boats than it is to get into any other boat in the entire world. It's actually easier to get into an Olympic team than it is to get into that boat race, because that boat race is formed of Olympians from multiple countries that end up at that university. So it's the hardest boat to get into.
It was full on, but wonderful time over there. It changed my life. And my son's just turning 18, and he just competed in the state rowing championships here and came second in his crew. So it's wonderful to see that progress. But coming back to answering your question, so as a result of being over there, that changed my life as a biomedical engineer, and I helped take forward that technology. Became Oxford's most successful spin-off company up until recently.
Wow.
So it was a company called Powderject. It was like a real-life Star Trek device that fired gold microparticles into the skin at 1,500 miles an hour. Sort of small rocket. So I was brought in as the rocket guy to really sort that out, and did, but became exposed.
Let's just zoom in on that a second, Mark. So firing gold particles at the skin, to what end? What was the reason for doing?
The purpose, so they're very, very small microparticles. That's very important, right?
Right.
And the purpose
rather than shards of some gold bullion.
Correct. Okay. Yeah. So very small particles coated in DNA vaccines, right? And the idea was to fire them into the skin to transfect the antigen-presenting cells in the skin to make vaccines work better. And that's the concept. So it's actually a precursor to what we now know as RNA vaccines. So this was kind of an earlier development. And so I was there for 8 years at Oxford, and of course, rowing aside, it was an amazing innovation apprenticeship for me. So the teaching and the butler and the college, all of that was there, and that was amazing for a young guy coming out from Australia. But this innovation apprenticeship, James, was incredible. So worked with amazing people, learned how to take things forward, how to work in interdisciplinary teams, but also learn about biology from an engineering perspective, and was blown away by how variable and how messy biology is from an engineering point of view, like the skin, physiology of the skin. And interestingly, the rocket stuff wasn't the hard stuff, because I kind of knew that. Well, no, I did know it. But the hard stuff was the skin. I discovered the biology, the biological need was the hard stuff, and became interested in that. And that led me on a pathway to this conversation today. And to be very, very brief, after taking that forward, Pfizer ended up buying the technology back in early 2000s for about $1 billion or so. And it was a unicorn before the term existed. But what do you do after that? I was 31 years old, right? That had all happened. And I thought, well, it's sort of less fun now because it's with the mothership in New York, et cetera, et cetera. So then Bill Gates put out a call for better vaccines in the developing world. Him and Melinda created the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation at that time. And I saw that as a call for arms to really get cracking as an engineer to help in that space. So tried to make that other technology work. It wouldn't. So took a step back, encouraged by my colleagues at college, and learnt immunology. So was giving lectures in fluid mechanics and engineering topics, and then jump on the bicycle and attend immunology lectures and map the skin's immune system and designed a device from the ground up to meet that need. And that's called the nanopatch for needle-free vaccine delivery.
Wow.
And it's placing vaccine directly to those cells. Instead of firing them in, it was with microneedles.
Yeah.
And around that time, James, I was talked into leaving Oxford to return to Australia and to the University of Queensland as a professor of biomedical engineering. I think I was about 33 or 34 at the time, years old.
Wow.
And to take forward this vision. And after my exposure at Oxford, that's what I set about doing. And it came to pass. So proved out the technology in a research group setting, founded a company called Vaxxus off the back of that experience. And like my mentor in Oxford, was a full-time professor, but effectively a full-time exec in Vaxxus as well. So I did that for about 5 years or so. And then around 2015, 2016, so Vaxxus is still going forward, to be clear, and I'm still a shareholder in that, and I wish it every success and foundational inventor, et cetera, but it was time for me to do the next thing after doing that for about 11, 12 years or so. And did a sabbatical at Harvard and worked with Bob Langer, the co-founder of Moderna there.
Wow.
And around that time, these guys came out, the early version of the Apple Watches.
Yeah.
And James, I was blown away. I immediately knew that they'll be held back in gaining access to the signals that matter because of the way they work with the skin, because I've worked with the skin for decades at that point.
Yeah.
And immediately set about coming up with a better way to go about that, which has led to the journey of WearOptimo today. So that's me trying to compress 27, 28 years into a few sentences.
You talked about the skin and you talked about the messiness. That was the word that you used. And biology, especially for physicists and mathematicians, as soon as biology comes in, it's just disgusting because it is just an absolute mess. And it's not clear, it's not pretty, it's not logical. And trying in any way to make a deterministic model based on human biology is... you're just barking up the wrong tree, basically, although that's obviously the ultimate aim would be to have what would be a full digital twin in inverted commas, much like Mark Webber, one of your investors in the latest company, would tell you about how they model Formula One companies. I'm sure companies, cars even. Yeah, exactly. Have a full working model of a car to see what a change in an angle of a wing would do. Wonderful if we could manage to do that for the entire human body and all its processes, but obviously we can't. But I'm interested in like how you would categorize the messiness of the skin. What is it about the skin that is so messy and difficult when we are trying to figure out innovations for the future that involve the skin?
Yeah, so it's messy, but it's beautifully messy. So what I mean by that is there's so many different things when we look at it. There's many sources of variability with the skin, right? So I'll just give you one example. With the rocket technology, firing microparticles into the skin, when we nailed the rocket, when all the microparticles hit the skin at the same speed, exactly the same speed, all the same size, you'd think they'd go to the same depth in the skin. They did not. There was this range of variability because that's the way the skin is. But I've learned that there's beauty in the variability. It's the variability that creates the ability for the skin to handle all manner of different circumstances. If it was on a knife edge and only suitable for a couple of different things and didn't work in a whole bunch of other scenarios, then that wouldn't work. So I've developed a deep respect for that variability and seen the beauty in it. But I can tell you the first time, James, when I looked at that, it blew my mind because just like you touched upon, in more classical versions of engineering, where you can characterize a material like steel or aluminium to 0.01% of something, it's nothing like that. And so, but then that's where the elegance is, but that's where the challenge is. So, okay, so how do you deploy engineering thinking into that setting, right? So how does that work? Because the standard rules are out the window. That I find intriguing, and so you need to let go of trying to get to the same level of resolution of an answer, but more gain really key insights on how the interface with biology works. I find that interesting. Don't go in with a widget and just try and apply it to various different things. Get curious about the core physiological need and design something from the ground up to meet that particular need and respect that interface. And I suppose that one sentence, it probably encapsulates a method that I've deployed for the last couple of decades now.
Really interesting. And actually, to use words like curiosity and respect when it comes to human biology, I think is fascinating, because it's almost, well, there are so many scientists that I speak to on here and in other conversations, and even Jessica and I, like my wife and my co-founder in SomX, like we're looking at early stage companies now to invest in from an angel perspective and things like that, and having these conversations. It's so interesting that people that can be real experts in a field scientifically or medically and clinically will still just have this really healthy dose of caution and respect when it comes to a research question. And there's a company called Booby Biome that we're involved with now, and those research scientists who are expert in the microbiome of breast milk and the infant gut were just so humbled when they initially looked into it, thinking, oh, we can just map this stuff. We'll just create a database. And Lydia, we had on the podcast talking about this. Oh, yeah, we'll just map the database of the microbiome, and then we'll just figure that out. And then all of a sudden they realized, the punchline to this was most of the bacteria were anaerobic, and therefore they just couldn't detect them because they've just exposed them to oxygen in their normal process. And all of a sudden, they just couldn't, and they were panicking. Lydia was saying she was panicking because I've just taken this investment thinking I can map this database really quickly, and all of a sudden I've got zero results. Like, what on earth is going on? And you can have done this for your whole life and then just be humbled by such a minute thing as that, as just exposing a group of bacteria to oxygen that wipes them all out. And then all of a sudden that becomes your biggest realization. And then all of a sudden the anaerobic storage products come out, and that's the innovation. And just all of these things down the line from just having this healthy dose of respect as well as curiosity. And I see this play out in the adoption in healthcare as well, which I'm sure that we can go on to talk about, and all the rest of it. But I think that is so fascinating, that you just have to have this level of respect. But the question I wanted to ask you actually was more technical than that. You mentioned a rocket that blasted this at the skin. Yeah. And again, that's interesting because I'm sure for listeners will be the same as me. When they think about a rocket, they're thinking about something that Elon Musk is firing off the Earth into space, and that seems like an obscenely high level of propulsion to be throwing anything at the skin. But what's the similarity here? Like, what is the rocket technology in inverted commas that is actually firing something at the skin? Again, the reason I ask is I think there's learning here for clinicians listening or people in health tech listening that can get an idea from this as to what is the innovation that you're throwing at the human body that relates to a rocket we might fire to the moon or Mars.
So the another name for it is, it's called a gene gun. Some people have heard of a gene gun before, and as a foundational technology, rocketry in general, I believe it's the only technology that scales 10 order of magnitudes, right? So what I mean by that is Elon Musk's rocket's north of 100 meters long, and you go down, so 10 meters, 1 meter, that's 2 orders of magnitude, then it's
got you
0.1, and it goes down to nanoscale rockets. And the principle deploys across the range. So
interesting.
It's quite interesting. And so where we were within it was rockets about that long. It looked like a real life Star Trek device, but instead of it going psh, like that, it was creating very high speed flows with helium, high pressure helium that you released quite quickly, and there's a bunch of mechanisms to set up this high-speed flow. But the flow wasn't to create thrust. It still did that a bit, and we had to deal with that. It was you had microparticles that you entrain within it, and it'll accelerate those microparticles to hit the skin.
Sure. Wow. Fascinating. Before we talk about WearOptimo and how you start applying all of this and the microneedle side of things, the last thing I want to talk about in your background is the very, very beginning. You mentioned that the companies that you've built are somewhat of an expression of yourself. I love that method of thinking because that's sort of how I feel about definitely when I speak to people on this podcast, that people end up expressing parts of themselves in these vehicles that can again sort of like live on without them in a way. Like as you've talked about, you move on for a company and a lot of your thinking and thought and all that sort of stuff. Is that a framework that you kind of relate to? Is that what you're hoping to achieve? These kind of areas of expression around the world in different companies and things like that? And is that I don't know, is that something, is that sort of the picture that you imagine of having things live on without you?
Absolutely. I mean, we've got to get used to that idea because our lives are finite anyway. We're only. I'm sure I'm not original in this thinking, but we're just tourists on the planet, right? So, what we that's what we do with it, and how we can be as useful as possible. So that's just how I look at it. So, if I didn't try and apply that approach, James, that you just talked about, then there's very, very few things that I'll be able to do or work on.
Yeah, okay.
But applying this approach and teaching people how to do it. So one of the things within WearOptimo as an example is that we're creating these innovation apprenticeships like what I received at Oxford. So for the next generation are learning how to do it because they're learning how to build companies. So if you're good enough, I mean, it's all merit-based, of course, but we've got people that are only just 2 years out from their undergraduate degree conducting clinical trials, as an example, right? So if you're good enough, you'll progress quickly and get exposed to a lot, and then learn that craft. I mean, my goal is, of course, for WearOptimo to succeed and create that major impact in healthcare. But on top of that, the younger guys, in particular within the team, learning how to do it so then they can go and do something like this in their own right as well, whatever it's going to be.
Love it. So let's talk about WearOptimo. And in fact, first of all, can you tell me what a microneedle is, why a microneedle is important in the future of healthcare and health tech, and then talk about WearOptimo for me?
Sure. So, of course, we all know what needles are. They've been around a long time and they put things in the body. We know that. But there's many, many limitations associated with the needle. Start with the obvious, which is people don't like them by and large. So needle phobia, about 20% of the population have a thing called needle phobia, which means that they'll actively avoid whatever the treatment is that is on offer by that vehicle. So it's an invasive technology. Now, if we move into the world of wearables now, and I'll come on to the function of where microneedles fit within it. In the world of wearables at the moment, we're at a really interesting point. By and large, today's traditional wearables, if you want to use that term, like a surface-based smartwatch, they use light, right? They're a light-based approach that's on the skin. And that works for heart rate, that works for a few simple things. But the skin, we talked about this respect for the skin, this respect, not disrespect, this respect for the skin is, it's an amazing barrier and it does a great job scattering light and messing with it so that you cannot gain access to the signals that matter the most, okay? So light doesn't work. So what's working then to gain access to biosignals? Well, if you look at continuous glucose monitoring sensors, James, have you got any experience with them, or have you dealt with them or talked with people?
Yeah, we've had Dexcom on here and back in the day, and yes, we're fully aware of them.
Yeah, so Dexcom's a great exemplar. Dexcom, Abbott, ones like that, right? So they've changed people's lives. In fact, Abbott's Libre device.
Yeah, we've had them on talking about Libre. Yeah,
it's considered the most successful medical device of any kind.
Wow.
Right now. I think its sales are like I don't know. Let's say it's $10 billion a year from
Yeah.
that device, but put sales to an aside. It's the millions of lives for people with type 1 diabetes that's completely changed their life. And that compared to the prick-based approach like taking your blood, it's fantastic. What you don't see in the advertising brochure is the size of the needle for those devices. It's about 5 to 10 millimeters long, so it's a significant needle
Okay.
that's implanted onto your arm.
Yeah.
Great
Okay.
if you have diabetes because the other options are awful.
Yeah.
But if you're thinking about getting beyond the Apple Watch and getting access to signals, light-based approaches don't work, and a lot of people don't want to have a needle long at all. So we know this, and off the back of that experience I was telling you about before with the vaccine delivery approach, I'm effectively a pioneer of the field of microneedles. I've probably got about 150 patents in that space.
Wow.
And so over about 25 years, I've just learnt the art of doing that. And it's probably, James, just like any other expertise you've probably come across, it's the nuances, like things that if you didn't really know, you wouldn't think makes much of a difference, but it actually does. So knowing those nuances. But my point is where microneedles come in the world of sensing is that I've identified you only need to go a hair's width into the skin to gain access to the signals that matter. Okay.
Wow. A hair's width into the skin to get the signals that matter. Wow. That's not what I would have thought.
No, indeed. It's even better when you think about the world of hydration, James. So one of the reasons why we've gone after hydration is not only the huge unmet need, which we'll get into, but it's an elegance of the interfacing with the skin, because when we dehydrate, of course, you already know this, James, but this is for the audience. But
I've probably forgotten it, Mark, so don't worry about re-educating me.
It's been real awakening and a learning for me about how hydration and dehydration works. But the first big surprise for me is that when we dehydrate, we don't dehydrate uniformly through the body, right? There's different things that dehydrate more than others. And then you think about why. Why does it do that? And the body's quite elegant. The body's saying, well, I want to prioritize certain areas and pull fluid from other areas to maintain that. So the areas that it's prioritizing is the blood and some critical organs like the heart and your brain. If they're gone, you're dead, okay? So what that means then is you pull fluid from other locations of the body to get into the blood, to maintain your blood as long as possible, okay? And the biggest water tank, apologize to medical doctors, I'm talking about this as an engineer, but the way I look at it is this way. So the biggest water tank in our body is the skin. So what that means is when we dehydrate, fluid is ripped from the skin and sent into the blood. So that's been known by quite a few people in the field. But what we found is that there's one layer within the skin, just below the tough, dead outer layer. It's called the viable epidermis. It's mostly interstitial fluid. And that is the zone that changes the most.
Interesting.
And so what that means then is that we tap into that with our micro electrodes, and we do bioimpedance sweeps and pull out ultra high fidelity signals. But unlike what others encounter when they're looking at other things, trying to pull out other things from the skin, skin's usually a lag indicator compared to blood. So that means you get a weaker signal compared to blood. That tends to be how it works. And I've studied this and worked in this area for a while. It's flipped here. So in the world of hydration, the skin is a lead indicator compared to the blood.
Wow.
And so we've found this beautiful interface where we gain this great signals and do it with a better resolution than what blood does. So, and James, we just completed our clinical study exploring this. And of course, you can you can dress up whatever company you like, but when you're in the world of health tech, biotech, in the end, you have a business hypothesis, right? So something has to work technically and everything else in order for things to fly. So in our clinical study, the overall hypothesis is that by doing this, the thing would work and we'd measure hydration. And it's come to pass that that's the case. And it's come to pass that it's performing better. Our sensor is performing better than gold standard blood draws. And in part, that's because of what I've just said, where the skin's a lead indicator compared to the blood. And a little side note, James, is you've got to be a little bit lucky as well. So we're lucky in the sense that where we are in the world right now with what AI is able to do. So we pull out great signals with the sensor, but if you look at it with the naked eye, they're just ultra high fidelity signals. They're clean, but the naked eye does not discriminate what your hydration level is. So we needed to create a complete AI model over about 3-4 years, multiple millions of dollars of investment to do that, to be able to read those signals. So James, if we tried to do that 5 years ago, where AI was at that point in time in human history, it wasn't available. So this is where we're lucky that the tech stack stacks up just at the right time for us.
So much of building companies is timing. So awesome and really fascinating. I want to dig into some of the specifics here. So what exactly is the microneedle measuring in the viable epidermis?
Yep.
And how is it doing that from a technological standpoint, leaning on the fact you're an engineer here, so I can ask these quite specific questions with you.
So it's electricity. So they're microelectrodes. So that's the first thing.
Okay.
So the simplest way of thinking of it is 2 electrodes in the skin, and we send a current through it. We send the current at a range of frequencies, and that's very important. Okay, and the term for it is called bioimpedance, but impedance is just another term for resistance, right? And so what happens, James, is as the skin changes its level of hydration, its resistance or bioimpedance changes. And also we do frequency changes because at high frequencies, at the ultra high frequencies, you get to pick up what's happening within the cells within the skin.
Yeah.
And at lower frequencies, you pick up the interstitial fluid between the cells. So you piece together those 2 parts of the puzzle. So that's what we achieve within that layer within the skin.
That's interesting because that's what makes me now start to believe you that that it can be better than a blood draw, because it's a different mechanism. And what you're not saying is like, oh, we do the same stuff, but because if you're looking at any sort of clinical picture, macro clinical picture of a person, and you're trying to assess dehydration, you might look for certain clinical signs that are visible to the naked eye, in which case they're far beyond what you're talking about. You might look at urine output, you might look at the renal function, you might look at hematocrit or MCV or sodium, or like all these things in the blood that quite, you can paint a very accurate picture putting all of that stuff together. But I guess what you're saying is, if we're talking about health tech and biotech and a hypothesis that's going to prove something of value for the future, a piece of scientific knowledge that we can then start to build products down the line from that can create more value, then we're talking about earlier. We're talking about how can we, figure this stuff out earlier, which is why then actually, if you're talking about bioimpedance of the viable epidermis of the skin using microelectrodes, then actually I now start to, and as clinicians, right, I'm being somewhat glib, but as clinicians, we're trained to find problems in things. And so we're always going to be skeptical. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's healthy skepticism in healthcare, because ultimately, signals like this that are inferred by clinicians, like this is where damage can happen, especially with acute kidney injury and like all sorts, especially if you're talking about fluid management, which, as an anaesthetist and intensivist, that gets very, very important. People get quite irate about fluid management, and renal physicians and intensive care physicians will often argue quite in depth about the perfect way to fluid manage somebody with various different things. So this is important, but I think being a different mechanism and being a different biological signal becomes very, very interesting. And especially when you're talking about now a clinical study, how many people were in that clinical study, or like how confident are you based on the clinical study, and what's planned down the line from an R&D perspective? Because I imagine with something like this in the company you're building, R&D and the clinical, I guess, R&D of figuring this stuff out has to be like quite a significant, well, frankly, spend, thinking of it from a CEO perspective, and allocating resource. So yeah, how confident are you at the minute with that clinical study, and what else have you got planned to sort of keep, I guess, proving this?
That's right. So what we're doing is, because we're not a university research group, and I've done that before and know what that's like.
Mm.
Our focus is not only proving what you've just talked about, but then doing it in a form that's a technology that's translatable. So it's the combination of the two. So it's actually a big ask to do that, but that's the challenge that
Mm.
we set about meeting. And
Yeah.
so the clinical trial, we set about doing this by we recruited 45 people, and they were tested twice. Okay. And the mechanism for dehydration was, so there's two arms to the study. One arm is you turn up fully hydrated, and you go through a dehydration rehydration protocol that's through exercise. So you exercise for half an hour, then take on fluids during rest period, and then continue that cycle for about 4 or 5 hours from memory. And then you do another arm, which is you do the same thing, but instead of taking on fluids, you continue to dehydrate.
Mm.
And James, the construct of the study is that we compare against all of the gold standards. So that is blood drawn, serum osmolality, urine tests as well, mass loss, and occasionally also a full body bioimpedance, where you sit on a bioimpedance stand and you have to stay still to do that. So maybe a good way of thinking about what we're doing is, instead of having bioimpedance around the whole body, where there's a whole bunch of things not sensitive to changes in hydration, like your bones as one example, right? People in the field of medicine are quite familiar with different ways of trying to infer the level of hydration, one of them being a pinch test of your skin.
Yeah.
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 And so that says your mechanical properties change as your skin is hydrated or not. That's really what they're testing, as do your electrical properties. So all we've done is taken a full body bioimpedance, but fitted it down into a tiny wearable, and we've been able to do that because you're tapping into this highly sensitive location within the body.
Yeah.
So that's a clinical study, and so we've achieved that proof of concept on that, which is fantastic. So proving that we achieve that performance. So that's step one. Now step two is taking that forward as a technology through further clinical and field testing, and turning that into a product. Okay, and so I'm sure you've heard in your podcasts that expression, that what keeps you up at night, right?
Yes.
It's a classic,
Yes.
cliche question. And if I'm honest with myself, probably a couple of years ago, it was, would that overarching hypothesis, does it actually work, right?
Yeah,
So you're putting
right. Of
yourself out on the
course.
line.
Of
And
course.
you believed it would work, but because we're scientists, because you have to wait for the science to come in, and the science doesn't
Yeah.
always play. Yeah.
No.
And so it was a special moment when we realized it works. So that's ticks that box. Now what keeps us up at night is taking it forward and turning it into the product. So that's the next step. So there's many elements to that.
I love it. Before we talk about that, I have a question just on the science before we move on. Is, do you see the day then that this becomes a new clinical standard for how we measure this? And I asked that question in my mind. I think there's always two levels when we talk about a new technology, particularly in the modern world, where we're on one hand, I think we're always talking about how new technology can help us with prevention or optimizing the health of someone. And I think on the other level, we're always talking about like accuracy and people in acute issues, basically. So, or ongoing issues in a hospital setting or whatever, and that kind of thing. Do you see this technology being a new clinical standard at one or both of those at any point? Is this strong and powerful enough, do you think? And is this a stepwise increase in accuracy enough to make it valuable? Is it enough of a stepwise increase in what we do now with prevention to help prevent certain things? Like, is the business model there on one or both of those levels? Does that make sense?
Oh, it's a beautiful question. So the short answer is totally. So
Right.
let me explain. So first is uh, the the scale of the problem of hydration. We made the call on this about 6 years ago, going into this, and it was
Right.
actually one of our advisors was the ex CEO of McLaren Formula One,
Oh,
McLaren Applied
nice.
Technologies, which is just up the road
That
from
is
here,
just up the road
James.
from me. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and he was working with me and whispered in my ear about the level of the problem of hydration, because we just started the company and massively powerful platform we we're building. What's the fit? What's the application? So that led to a cascade of to this where we are today. But in the last few years, in particular, James, there's one example. Like just last year, there was an amazing publication in Nature Nephrology Reviews, and it was about
Mm.
the scale of the problem of hydration, which most people didn't know. I didn't know, and I've been a student of this for about 5 6 years.
Mm.
And what they pointed out was this: was that when first up, about half of Americans are chronically and mildly dehydrated. Okay,
Yep.
now you kind of think, oh, that makes sense. But you think, well, what's the big deal? Okay, I'll have a drink of water, or I'm just struggling a little bit. I'll soldier on.
Mm.
It turns out it's a massive problem because they've discovered that it puts the body into a state of stress, low grade stress. Okay, and there's many reasons for that. It turns out there's a biomarker that controls the kidneys and the kidney function,
Hmm.
and it makes the kidneys work in a certain way when you have less blood. It makes them work
Mm.
harder. But that same biomarker also puts the brain into it releases cortisol as well. Anyway, to cut a long story short, it's such a massive problem that they've figured out that it drops your life expectancy by about 4 years.
Whoa.
It increases your incidence of dementia by about 48%. It
Whoa.
affects everything, and so much so, not just their work, but the work of many others. There's a push in the medical community for uh, hydration to become the sixth vital sign.
Yeah.
Okay, now I think there's some other candidates. I'm not saying it's the only one, but
Sure.
there's the five, and I keep forgetting what they are. But you'll be able to walk me through what they are. But there's this sixth vital sign. Now, what's really interesting with that, just as a side note, if it's the work of others, if hydration was considered a disease, it would be level pegging with diabetes in terms of its
Mm.
scale. Okay, so you think, okay, if it's such a massive problem, what are the solutions? And the solutions are extremely rudimentary right now. And you touched upon those. There's blood draws, urine tests, pinch
Mm.
tests, doctors looking into your mouth to see how dry it
Mm.
looks. And it's unbelievably rudimentary. And so, what we've been able to do is come in with this solution, which is deployable in many different areas because it's a wearable format, feels like a sticker as well because the microneedles are so small. Uh, and we've created uh, the first digital biomarker for hydration, but it's in a format of a wearable. So how we deploy that is of course critical, but the range of where it's deployable in clinical settings, and I'm sure we'll come on to talking about anesthesia and how that works and vastly improved operations, et cetera. But it's many other settings as well. We're talking about work environments. If you're in, say, an outdoor exposed environment in the mining sector, as one example,
Mm.
it's affected them in many different ways. How your brain works, if you're only 3% dehydrated, as one example. It's the equivalent of being over the blood alcohol limit with your cognitive function. And so uh, there's that setting, many others. But in the elite sports settings, you mentioned Mark Webber before. Mark's one of our investors. He used to race with Red Bull, as you well know,
Mm.
and he's managing Oscar Piastri over there at McLaren. And Mark knew the issues of hydration because he knew how it affected him as a driver.
Yeah.
He talks openly and publicly about a crash he did at one of the Monaco races years and years ago. And the post-analysis showed that he hit the wall at something like 200 miles an hour. And what a critical reason for that is that his state of hydration at the time was low. And that was, he's quite advanced. He was using all the tech that was available, but he knew that that was an issue. So there's a massive range of applications. And of course, we need to focus because we can't do everything all the time. And but just the clinical, the scale of the clinical problem with hydration is huge.
Yeah, and it opens it up to this like population level. Like the question being like, what if everyone wore this? You know, what would be the business model if you really scaled this up to population level? Everyone had one. You know, it was incentivized by employers because they want you at full cognitive capacity all day. Therefore, you stick one of these on and then give you free drinks in the office and all the rest of it. And then all of a sudden, it's really interesting then how like, yeah, you're talking about optimization there by the people that are incentivized to optimize you. But actually then you're preventing down the line, and actually that's where it becomes interesting. But even if you're picking up people down that prevention journey, so maybe you're not optimized by your employer to give you them at work, maybe your sports club or you're this or you're that or the other, like maybe you're not there, but maybe from a healthcare point of view, if you've given these in an outpatient appointment, or if you're like all of that sort of stuff anywhere in your healthcare journey, the GP, the this, that, the other, like then if there's advantage to it at any point down that healthcare model, it gets really interesting because you're quite right in terms of the cognitive issues, the chronic issues, and the stress on the body. You're quite right that, yeah, all these things exist. And, you know, even in the back of my mind all the time, like I know it's something that I'm rubbish at. I'm just rubbish at gradually hydrating myself through the day. My wife's incredibly good at it. I always got a water bottle with her, and it's only when I'm playing a bit of tennis that all of a sudden I realized I'm absolutely parched as soon as I start playing, and I'm like guzzling like gallons and gallons of this stuff. So yeah, it's a huge issue. So tell me about WearOptimo then, and exactly what the application is here. Where on that journey are you going? Clinical? Are you going prevention? Are you going elite sport? Are you going for the everyday person? Business model wise, are you going through employers? Are you going B2C? Are you going like more healthcare stuff? Like where are you thinking of this? And tell me all about what you're up to.
Okay, so James, coming into forming WearOptimo, of course, you have your experiences and observations that lead to your thinking. So coming into that, the previous things I'd done, the ones that we've talked about, they were very much in the world of biotech. And so they're great, and I love biotech. But one of the challenges with biotech, by and large, if we put the pandemic to an aside, is it takes a long time to go from idea to product. So as one example, one of my colleagues and friends is the inventor of the HPV vaccine. His name's Ian Fraser. And it took Ian 17 years to go from idea to product, and that's an incredible success story. Okay.
Yeah.
Most of the time, unfortunately, things don't get there, and they take a very long time. So I was highly aware of that. So when I was creating WearOptimo, it was very important for it to be a different game. Very important to be health tech, not biotech. And so what that means is that it's a rapid route to market and a different game. So our strategy, our approach, if you like, is because James, we don't have any biological elements to what we're doing. So what I mean is it's just microelectrodes, it's just plastic that's applied to the skin.
Okay. Yeah.
What that means is that we don't have to worry about anything like that. And we've got such great advice within our team. As one example, our on our advisory board, I've mentioned in passing our advisory board, or Bob Langer's, the founder of Moderna, is on our advisory board, but so is a guy called Peter Barton Hutt, who was ex-chief counsel of the FDA.
Wow. Okay.
So he wrote the legislation on this, and I bring it up because working with him and others, we found a way to get to market really quickly that does not require regulatory approval in critical territories, including the US. Okay, and I can go into the reasons why, but we're beginning with elite sports, and then move into the mining sector and also into defense. but it's effectively business to business, so elite
Yeah,
sports
got you.
teams, etc. And James, we begin with elite sports because they're the people crying out the most for the advantages through performance,
Yeah.
and also they're voluntarily sending themselves through such ranges of things that normal people in society would not do. They're like our Formula One engines of humanity,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that gives us amazing signals of range to build much stronger algorithms as well. And there's
Interesting.
great
Yeah, because
interest.
they're the most extreme. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So we begin there, and we will get some revenue there, but it's not. That's not where the main revenue is. But it's a rapid path to market, and indeed highly visible work.
Yeah.
And then we move into the other two sectors I was referring to, but all of that data. So it's medical. It's a medical grade technology. So we're following all the correct standards, etc. So we can use that data and have that help propel our first clinical sensor. So
Mm.
this approach accelerates everything, our time to market, our sales, but also ironically for those that follow the traditional pathway towards medical device sales, for argument's sake, this is a much faster way because it's a health tech approach to get the clinical application as well. So that's our overarching strategy. Time's really important to market. We're really fortunate to be in a position where we have the only wearable that's out there that monitors hydration effectively. You mentioned Dexcom in passing. We have the potential to become the Dexcom of
Yeah.
hydration.
For people listening, I want to just highlight something here that when it comes to business model, I think people can often think it's one or the other. And should I be a medical device or not? And it's like, no. What you've just described, I think, is a really wonderful execution of how to use markets that are going to feel the value of it in order, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah,
someone that can take a punt on it as something that might give them something useful, chances are it will, because obviously you've done the studies, etc., so you know it's
yeah,
going to. But these people can take more of a risk on it. It's just extra information to them
yep,
in elite sport in this way. It's a new signal that can be part of a picture, and therefore it's of value. So you're going to a place where it's of value already. You can start to get revenue and start to build proof of this person bought it, they feel value, they bought it again, and therefore you're starting to develop this. And I like that, because then you're going to apply that to somewhere. I mean, frankly, what feels nice is that it feels quite meaningful to then apply it in the mining world, actually,
yep,
in an employer setting where,
yep.
cognition matters, and like all of these things matter, in safety and all of that kind of thing. But again, there's direct value. Defense, same thing. And then to use that for the data that can then turn you into a medical device, which I'm sure you're going to know all about that, particularly someone from the FDA on your board as well. But it's this thing about thinking about a new way of measuring fluids and hydration in the body. You could be forgiven for thinking, oh god, that's such a mountain to climb, because ultimately it needs to be a medical device. I'm going to need to raise all of this money, I'm going to need to do my RCT, I'm going to need to build the product and the sensor to this grade already, I'm going to have to do like and it's the on a smaller scale. I think the world has changed. We've seen this a lot in people building health tech companies, that the barrier to actually bringing a device to market means VC funding is needed. Then you need VC scale, and all of a sudden the thing just falls over because it's local for local problems quite often, and you can't get that level of scale, and therefore we don't get the products to market. But I was even speaking to someone yesterday for an episode of this podcast that talked about, if you can just build almost a services company to begin with, if you can just build something that someone's going to pay for in some way, make your product useful in some way, or even just make the expertise in your team useful in some way, so you can start to build revenues, that can then be used to keep pushing things forwards and just keep going forwards to a point where all of a sudden now you have assets, you have IP, you have something, you have revenue, you have contracts, you have proof, and all of a sudden, hey ho, it's actually much easier to raise the money now that you've done this thing, right? So it's a fascinating way that you've put that together in such a neat plan for how you become a medical device through business models where people are already feeling value, I guess.
Well, thank you, James. I think so. The way we looked at it is, what's the point? So, say for argument's sake, you have the world's leading technology, right? And then you move across to your business model, and you've got something that's not done well or rudimentary. That's a tragedy, right?
Which there's so much of in healthcare, by the way, Mark. Sorry to interrupt, but like again, I just want to really make this point that there are fantastic world-leading products in the graveyard currently because there's no business model behind them. You can have the best product in the world. There's nothing to say it'll work in healthcare without a decent plan.
That's right. So, you've heard me talk before about being an engineer. So, I just look at it that way. So, uh, you you need to have the end to end for it to succeed. So, it's the science, it's the team. We're very hardwired in doing things as a team. So that's
Mm,
one of the reasons why I love rowing so much. Is all that matters is what the boat does. It's not what the individual in the boat
it's
does,
true.
right? So
Mm,
there's that, but there's that other part, which I think you've actually explained in a better way than me. But it's the business model needs the same level of attention as everything else for things
mm.
to click and to fire. So, of course, I was no guru in this, but there's a lot of picked up experience over the years and having done it, parts of that. So, apply that learning, but also bring in expertise of people with hard won lessons and deploy it.
Talk to me about the actual product now. What does it look like? Where does how is that signal then fired to somewhere where people can interpret it and read it? How does that then turn into a feedback loop for some action for someone to take? Talk me through the actual usage of the product, I guess.
So I'm kicking myself because this evening I meant to bring some sample sensors from the
Oh,
office home. So I'll describe it. Uh, from the outside looking in, it looks very much just like a CGM, continuous glucose sensor. So just a small, like a coin, if you like.
sure.
Uh, but the big difference is, unlike a CGM where you've got that massive needle I was telling you about before,
Mm,
if you look on the underside, there's the microneedles are so small. If you run your finger along it, it feels like Velcro. So
wow.
that's the form factor.
Would that damage this? Just a really stupid question now. Would that damage them if you were to run your finger over it? Like, what's the actual makeup of those?
So no, we've designed them to be quite strong. So
Okay.
we take into account form factor and user experience, etc.
Wow.
But when you apply it, so because of course what works in its favor, James, is they're so small as well. So
Yeah,
the way the forces work, etc. It's in its
sure.
favor, but it feels like a sticker when you apply it to
Mm,
the skin. So what happens next? So what happens next is it's transmitting a signal with Bluetooth Low Energy to a device like this, like your Apple phone,
mm,
and you're getting a real time readout of your level of hydration. So say, James, you're wearing it, you've applied it, just like how you would if you were wearing a CGM where you'd see your levels of glucose. You eat a banana, your glucose changes. You're naughty, you
mm.
have a piece of chocolate cake and it spikes, and et cetera, et cetera. So here what you're getting is that real-time readout of your hydration and to what level it is and what zone you're at, because we've created this new hydration index. Now, there's some applications where you don't need that level of resolution. So, say if you're in the mining sector, it might be traffic lights. So, red, orange, green. So, if you're green, continue as you are. If you dip into orange, take some fluids, get back into green. If you're red, stop what you're doing and
Yeah.
take your fluids to get back to green. So, the important thing though is it's a real time readout and you're getting that behavior feedback as well. So, you're shaping behavior. And it's quite interesting. Yes, there's people that get around with the comedy-sized water bottles, and that's fine. We should drink as much as we can, but we just don't know what we should be having. We don't have any
It's
feedback.
true. It's true. And is it true that when they say, by the time you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated? Is that true?
It's absolutely true. So the, this uh, there's a measure for how well things work, and it's called ROC, Receiver Operator Characteristic, and we've looked at this, and there's a score you get, James. If you score of 0.5, the score is like tossing a coin. If the score is 1, the it's perfection, which doesn't exist. But if you think of blood tests that are really well established in really, really mature areas, you might get a score of 0.9, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, guess what the score is for thirst, for mild dehydration. So I've given you the range.
You tell me.
So it's 0.36. It's
Oh,
worse than
wow.
chance.
Wow. Okay.
So when they say thirst doesn't work, or when you're thirsty it's too late, it's entirely true. Thirst only
Wow.
kicks in. I was talking about lag indicators. So thirst
Sure.
is by the time
A
thirst
late
kicks in,
yeah.
you are massively dehydrated.
Right. And you mentioned the hydration index, that's the way that you present the information. How do you determine what that is? Because you talked about, obviously, the microneedles are electrodes and you're
Mhm.
measuring, I don't know, my physics isn't great, voltage, current, whatever's actually being measured. But then is that
Yep.
going through a calculation to give a number that you're then presenting? Like, what is it that you're actually measuring versus calculation versus presentation? If that
Correct.
again makes sense.
Yeah. The measurement with our raw signals is your level of impedance versus frequency. So that's the raw readout of data.
Yeah.
And what we've done is we've created these algorithms, this machine learning model, which converts that data into a digital image, like a face, if you like. And it knows, because we're training the algorithm, so we know what that level of hydration is, and for that type of signal, and it trains the hyperparameters of that algorithm to learn that. And then we turn around with that algorithm, and James, say you're wearing the sensor, and only 20 seconds of data asked our algorithm what's the level of hydration for James, and that algorithm is getting it correct, massively higher score than the ones I was talking about before, so north of 0.7, 0.72. So that's the approach. Now, with regards of how we convert that into the index, that the resolution of the index we're still determining. Like, should that be a score of 1 to 7, like you have with an Apple Watch for your UV index, or should it be 1 to 99? We don't know what the right answer is for that. That's something that we need to figure out with form factor, etc. But the important thing is that it's in our hands to figure that out. So we're working with the key parties to decide that.
It's really interesting. And where my mind goes, obviously, with my clinical background, is thinking about things like heart failure, where people are discharged home and there's things like the scales that measure their weight if they're retaining too much fluid, and things like renal disease, where particularly if you've got renal disease and heart failure, all of a sudden now your fluid management's really complex because you've got to really walk the line of too much or too little fluids and things like that, where this type of thing might not give us the absolute answer yet, but this is data and signals in real time that can then be part of future algorithms that can really determine this stuff. And I just wonder how many of those conversations clinically you've had, maybe with intensivists or renal physicians or that kind of thing, that really see the value in this. Is this somewhere where they see value?
It's huge. So you've hit the nail on the head with critical areas, and then another one is perioperative care. So
of course, yeah.
And so the situation. Let's just talk about that one as a starting point. So, and I'm really keen to hear your insights, as we've been talking with anaesthetists in particular. There's about 310 million surgeries conducted around the world per year. And the work of others has shown that about 1 in 5 of those surgeries, something goes wrong in the surgery because of poorly managed hydration of the person coming into the surgery. So about half the people that come into surgery are dehydrated. And of that, another half of them are severely dehydrated. And so those complications there's so many levels to this. So sadly, people do die, James. But in addition to that, it leads to longer surgeries, much greater issues down the line, increased stay in hospital by a couple of days. And then you start thinking, well, as I have, from a curiosity point of view, why is that? What's the driver for hydration being such a big problem? And I'm still becoming a student on how anesthesia works. So I think this is where you can teach
No
me
one knows
about.
is the punchline, Mark. People pretend to know. We do exams on this where it's like, what's the mechanism that people just think this works, and then you're like, yeah, people think it's this or that, or no one actually has a clue. So the actual consciousness is just one of those broad areas in human knowledge, which is just a big black hole. No one's got a clue what it is, how you gain it, how you lose it. We've got proposed thoughts on it, but the answer is no one really knows how the actual anesthesia works.
Well, against that backdrop, so one thing I do know is that if you're dehydrated, you have less blood in your body. Okay, and so I'm told that kind of critical drugs that are usually used, that it sends the body into a lower heart rate and a drop in your blood pressure. That's the induction of anesthesia. So
That is true.
I kind of get that as a guy with a fluid mechanics background. I follow that.
Yeah.
So it sort of stands to reason, I suppose, that if you've got a lot less blood to work with and your body's in a distressed state to start with, then that leads to much bigger drops in blood pressure because it can't maintain the vessels.
And you've got very up and down anesthetic after that. You've got a lot of work to do because you're constantly then chasing your tail trying to get the blood pressure up and then down and then up and then down, and it can be more of a nightmare.
You got it. So I'm still trying to figure that out, but it's so resolvable because if you just turn up in a fully hydrated state, then that's addressed. So you can imagine our sensor, someone doing nil by mouth, and I know that that's changing coming into surgeries, but I think because of the psychology of that, don't eat this, don't eat that, people tend to just underhydrate. And so if you're able to wear that sensor coming in the prep for a surgery and arrive in a hydrated state, that will make a massive difference to dealing with all manner of those problems. And and there's many other parts of that, of course, post-surgery as well, etc. But I think that's a good, in the context of this podcast, a good starting point for the discussion.
Yeah, it's true. It's funny you mentioned the psychology of that leading to more dehydration. It's so true because you get like a load of different numbers thrown at you as a patient, which I can imagine is really confusing because you're told, oh, you can eat, you can't eat anything, or you've got to eat at this time, but you can have milk at this time, but you can have water at this time. And so most people, I imagine, just are like, oh, I'm just gonna have nothing.
Yeah,
it's just I just don't want to, because then like what the consequences of getting those times wrong? Oh, you might just aspirate in the middle of surgery and like, oh God, I'll have nothing then in that case. Like it's fine. So yeah, I imagine that does lead to like loads more dehydration, to be honest, because yeah, and especially for older patients, older adults that don't have the physiology to cope as well or compensate as well as younger people, then those changes in hydration state, you're right, can make much more of a difference. Really pulling on knowledge from a long time ago here, so apologies to any active anaesthetists that want to disagree, but. Yeah.
Well, but you're right. I mean, aged care things get a lot worse as we get older. The sensors in our body that tell us that we need to drink get blunter. So when we see someone who's older not drinking, it's not because they can't be bothered to. It's because their body's not telling them to. And then there's sort of other layers to it. So incontinence, etc. You don't feel like drinking because you just don't want to go there. So there's many layers to it, unfortunately.
So Mark, wrapping this up now and thinking about the future. So I can imagine, I often do this exercise where I'm talking to people that have got future facing ideas and I think about what would healthcare look like in 50, 100 years? Would it look the same in this area? Well, absolutely not. It's completely reasonable to assume that in 100 years time, we have microneedle sensors that are assessing our hydration, that is preventing things in the community. And it's just a broad thought exercise that I tend to do that's just like, okay, yeah, fair enough. Like, this is clearly going to be something that that is likely to come in and likely to happen. And I can see from the business models that you've put together that, yeah, there's going to be clear areas where this is going to come in very quickly. There's going to be the slower stuff in the broader healthcare things, but I can actually see very genuinely, without much thought stretching at all, that this is quite a straightforward thing in terms of its application, not straightforward at all in its practicality of how it's built, because there's obviously some serious science and engineering that goes into it. But that makes me think about competitors, and it makes me think about potential threats to this, because I think there's always, the things that keep you up at night, for example, like you've got a lot of patents in this area, which is going to protect it on some level. But I think there's always going to be people that come out with a similar patch that's perhaps not as good or does something slightly differently, or similar claims. And I know that from like a wearables and a textiles perspective, there are people like doing various bits and bobs in that space to do things similar. Like, how do you look at the competitive landscape, and how do you view any kind of existential threats from a technology perspective, or anything else? Like, what's going to really make this succeed, do you think?
Yeah, so I think like I've learnt that science wins. So it's how you do it as well. So let me explain what I mean by that. So I'm not talking about sitting in some lab with a test tube and doing curiosity-driven stuff, but in the world of hydration, as an example, we didn't touch on another body of approaches. So we talked about light-based approaches like an Apple Watch,
Yeah.
but uh, there's there's approaches out there that use sweat. Uh,
Yes.
they detect what
Yes.
sweat's doing, and uh, so the thing about that is it's fundamentally flawed because sweat is not correlated with your hydration at all. So let me explain that. So as one example, as a thought experiment, James, I could be dehydrated, not sweating at all right now, totally dehydrated, as just one
Mm.
example. But even when you are sweating, you're sweating for a different purpose than as a proxy for hydration. The purpose for sweat is usually heat transfer purposes, not due
Mm.
to anything else. But my point is there's some approaches out there that kind of are playing in the space of hydration, but they're just detecting sweat. And as a result of that, there's no clinical evidence. They've not conducted clinical trials, and I think it's because they know what the result's going to be, right? So the it's stuck in that space of lighter weight stuff. So we've come at this with the approach that I've told you about before, and a deep IP base with that. So with a serious technology to tackle a serious problem. And so now on the competitive landscape, we know what life's like, James. So if you come up with a really good idea, then people want to copy it, right? That's life. So
It's not a bad
how do
sign
we?
either.
Yeah, yeah. So how do we play in that space? Well, you touched on patents. So yes, of course we have patents, and we continue to do that. And WearOptimo has 45 patent filings, 13 that are granted, no, 15 that are granted now. And that's great. We'll continue to do that. But that's only one tool in the shed that
Mm.
you can work with. You've got to have a multitude of tools, and I think the biggest one is speed.
Mm.
So you've got to move quickly. And that's the best way of staying ahead of your competition. So that's our game.
Mark, this has been an absolute pleasure. I think that for people listening that are in health tech, biotech, but in areas where they're developing new science, this has been awesome to listen to, because I think one thing that you're clearly very good at is blending the science and the commercial. Because as you will know from the academic positions that you've held and that you do hold now, there's a lot of very, very good science that ends up sitting on a shelf, and the ability to actually commercialize it is a whole nother ball game. It's a whole nother skill. And like you said about the attention that different areas deserve in order to build a business, that the business model needs as much attention as the product, which needs as much attention as the science, which needs as much attention as all of the market, all the different components. And I think that that's really what I'm taking away from this, is that how clean, how neat the business model is. And it's funny because, sometimes when we talk to people on here about elite sport and things like that, it can feel a bit gimmicky. This feels very robust because whilst, Mark Webber's an investor and we're talking about Formula One, it didn't form a huge part of this very open conversation, in the sense that it's there as the area of proof and of value initially. And it's there for that reason. And then there's another thing, and then there's another thing. So your point about speed, for companies to develop these moats behind them, it's progress, isn't it? And it's not get caught up in the cool and the fancy and the shiny. It's to use elite sport for what it's there for, which is that this is a perfect area where we can prove the optimization of these people that are having these huge swings in the biomarker that we're measuring, and therefore it's good for that reason. It's not good just because it's cool and it's fancy and it's what everyone's looking at. It's cool for a very scientific reason, that it's the biggest swing in hydration for the biggest amount of activity, and it's good for that reason because we collect the data and then we move on, and then it's the next phase, and then it's the next phase. I think that's been really interesting to listen to because, as I say, I think the way that this whole picture has been built, it's very credible and it feels very robust, like it really does. And I think I've had one of those sweat companies on, I think it was quite a while ago, that was talking about that kind of thing. I think you're right. I think the fact that it can be used by anyone at any point, in the sense that you're right, it's not using a bodily fluid that's only, coming out at a certain time. It's literally, it's there on the skin. It can be used. I think there's so much to this that has so much potential for the future. It's backed and based in so much robust science that I think it's really interesting. I genuinely do. I think it's so interesting. And perhaps that's my bias as an anaesthetist. Perhaps that is my bias on where it's drilled in us to actually give a crap about fluid management far more than the average person. So perhaps it's useful for that reason. But I think there's so much just interesting here, particularly those two different areas. Can we optimize the normal person to have perfect cognition and, perfect physicality at all times based on their hydration? Can we do that for the people that need to be performing? But also, can we use these signals to optimize and prevent things, before they happen, in the sick and the unwell and the people that need it from a healthcare perspective? I think the fact that you're playing and you have a plan for all those areas, I think just only adds to that kind of robust nature of this, which I think is really nice. And Mark, final question for people that want to learn more about this, or to get in touch with you, or to that might have an application for this, or to help you along your journey. What is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Excellent. Thanks, James. So a few mechanisms. One is on our, so we have an email address, so it's info@wearoptimo.com. So we monitor that, of course. But also I'm there on LinkedIn. Just reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. So there's that mechanism. If you want to pick up the phone and call WearOptimo, on our website there's our phone number there as well. So if you're walking past our building in Brisbane, Australia, you can always knock on the front door.
Amazing. I might be there in May, so I might knock on that door myself.
That'd be great.
Yeah, we're going to Digital Health Festival again and doing some stuff there. But anyway, we'll talk about offline maybe. But Mark, honestly, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, and I'm sure a lot of people will have learned a lot of stuff from today.
Thank you, James.